Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work as a school-based counselor at a school in Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters, Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at Canaan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good afternoon, friends. I'm in a great mood today. I've gotten into a routine for the last 10 days, really pretty much ever since I got back from Texas on May 1st. I'm outside from like 6:30 a.m. to 10 a.m., except Mondays. It's when our team has our staff meeting. So I stop at 9:30 on Mondays. And I'm just working out. I'm working on just beautifying the grounds. And sometimes it's as simple as deadheading roses or, watering or replacing a shrub that didn't make it with a new one. And sometimes it's like taking a pickaxe through that Georgia clay. But there's something about just the power of nature and God's creation and the birds chirping. When you're all alone at your desk every day in a sedentary sort of work environment, you kind of just need to be active and just does something for your mind, releasing hormones, or I don't know. I'm not an expert on this. I just know it does something for you, and it really, really, really lifts my spirits. The crazy thing is, don't let anyone ever tell you that you can't change. Because if you were to survey anyone in our family and say who would be the least likely of all family members, and I'm talking about extended family, not just nuclear family, to garden and to cook, I would be voted last. And here I am now gardening and cooking, and my family's like, who is this dude? So it just goes to show that people really can make changes in life. So in today's episode, I have an announcement about Counselors Connect, and then I'm going to share 4 or 5 observations from my Texas trip that I hope you'll find interesting. And then we'll hear from Dr. John Pollard again, the Dean of Franke Honors College at the University of Arizona. Today he's going to give us a panoramic view of honors colleges in the United States. He'll even give us 9 questions that we should ask if we're trying to compare one honors college to another, so we can really see the differences. We don't really get into Franke this week. That'll be the next 2 weeks. We'll do a deep dive on University of Arizona's specific honors college known as Franke. But today it's just a panoramic view of honors colleges in the U.S. and how they're different, how to compare them. All right, friends, so let's dive in. So for Counselors Connect, I want you to know that we are taking applications again. We're off this month for Memorial Day because, I wasn't thinking. It lands on Memorial Day, Sunday. So we're taking May off and December off. We'll meet 10 times a year, 4th Sunday of every month for an hour. And we alternate between breaking out in small group discussions and having a special speaker. We have lined up all of our special speakers for the next 6 months. So we're going to have a specialist on AI that I think is going to be great. We're going to have 2 people that you've heard on the podcast already. Matt Bonser, Dean of Admission at Colorado College, and Hillary Dickman. And they're going to talk to us about how do schools navigate it when they offer regular decision and early action and early decision 1 and early decision 2. How do they navigate all that? So we're gonna have a speaker come speak for 30 minutes, take questions for 30 minutes. And then we'll have Jed Apparuth, who's got as much expertise as anyone I know on standardized testing. He got his doctorate on this stuff, and he's going to particularly focus on changes going on in the ACT. So if you'd like to hear from a speaker, do Q&A, and then on alternate months, we have discussion topics with the whole group, and then we break out in small groups according to counselor type: public school counselor, private independent school counselor, CBO counselors, and independent educational counselors just go to yourcollegebounkid.com. So basically, you would just go to yourcollegebounkid.com and you go to the resources tab, and it's the bottom tab under resources. It's the fourth one. It just says Counselors Connect. It's a one-page form. Takes probably 90 seconds to fill it out. All right, friends, let's get to this Texas trip. I want to share some things that I think would be of interest to you. The first two things I'm going to combine, in some ways they're going to seem very, very different, but I think you'll see why I'm grouping them together, because there's a theme that emerges from them. So the first has to do with the war on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then also the reduction of funding, particularly for R1 schools from the National Institute of Health, and how these things are really rocking colleges in profound ways. So let's just talk for a bit about the NIH funding cuts. So Harvard is expected to lose $2.6 billion in federal funding. Now, not all of that is NIH. There's other funding and grants they have for scientific and medical research as well. Johns Hopkins is over $1 billion from NIH. And then there's another cut, which is USAID. USAID has also been cut, and that also impacts the schools. So they're anticipating a layoff of 2,000 employees, 2,000, because of these cuts. Like, this is really serious. UPenn, $240 million. University of Michigan, $136 million. Pittsburgh, $168 million. Columbia, $111 just off NIH, and then there's other funding as well. And then, I could go on and on. There are a lot of schools. I know Michigan State is like 82 or 84 million. I was looking at Wisconsin and Ohio State. They're like 49, 64 million. A lot of these schools are losing more money in funding than all of the tuition they brought in together. So that's why you have to lay 2,000 people off. And it impacted my own daughter, Joy. I mean, she's supposed to be on a search committee to help hire somebody else in her department, and then word comes down, hiring freeze. So I've seen how it's impacted my own household. So that's the first thing, and that's stuff that we've talked about before. And then, of course, really the war against diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Now, why do I group these two together? Well, first of all, let me just talk about what's going on in Texas with the war against diversity initiatives. There was a bill, Bill 37, that pretty much went along party lines 2011, and this was in April. And this would drastically limit how state public universities teach their students about history, race, and inequality. And there was a lot of talk about that when I was there. So, like I said, what do I see as a similarity between these two? The similarity is that it's having a chilling effect on schools as they see their autonomy threatened. One administrator said to me, "We're not Harvard. Our pockets are not that deep. We can't push back." Another one said to me, "It's a shame that you have to govern out of fear," meaning lead your school out of fear. And a third one said to me, "We thought as a private institution, we were protected from government overreach when it comes to diversity initiatives, but we were sadly mistaken." So that's one of the things I wanted to share with you that was a takeaway from the trip. Completely different direction. I'm going to go to a totally different topic. So if you're a regular listener of the podcast, we have talked quite a bit about something that's been growing pretty quickly across the country. And it's oftentimes referred to as SAR, or the full name, self-reported academic record. And colleges have been going more and more to this, requiring this SAR, or self-reported academic record. And some of the reasons they'll list are kind of in students' best interest. They'll talk about how it streamlines the admission process and students can self-report their courses and grades directly from their transcript, eliminating the need for official transcripts during the initial application phase. They'll talk about, in some cases, there's cost savings because in some cases, applicants are paying to have transcripts sent off from different schools, and now they don't have to do that anymore. But they're also, and the main reason is it really helps the institution. It helps the institution be able to do a faster review. So colleges can begin evaluating applications faster applications can get complete faster rather than waiting for official documents. And another big one is consistency across applications, right? So SAR creates a standardized format for academic records, making it easier for teams to just compare just different students from different schools. So those are some of the reasons why SAR has grown in popularity, and it's been not just in one region of the country. It has been more popular with large state institutions that get tens of thousands of applications. So you'll see it in southern schools, like, for example, Clemson. Just giving you some examples. University of Tennessee, Texas A&M, Texas Tech. I mean, just mentioning some schools that use SAR. But you'll see it in Northeast schools as well, like Pittsburgh and Rutgers and Penn State. And you'll see it in Midwest schools like University of Minnesota. And you'll see it in Western schools like University of Oregon and many, many others. So you're like, Stuck, what does this have to do with your Texas trip? Well, I learned on this Texas trip that SAR is now become STARS. So it's been rebranded from SAR to STARS. The new name includes the word transcript included in it. And they're not just going by STAR, but STARS with an S. So self-reported transcript and academic record system, to be technically accurate, is the new term. So why has this name changed? Well, part of it is branding. As more colleges use and get used to and adopt the system, the term STARS makes it more intuitive for the applicants and admission officers just to kind of understand the platform's function. Part of it is what some people are calling a brand refresh. A name change like this is often part of larger branding to modernize the image and to align with changes in technology. And then, mostly importantly, more clarity and more accuracy. So the new name STAR includes the word transcript. It puts transcript right at the front and center of it. And it just helps clarify that students are not just reporting records, but they're actually replicating their official high school transcripts. So it's designed to reduce confusion and more clarity, more concise and more accurate, and simplify the process. So that's something that that decision didn't happen on my trip, but I learned about it on the trip. So I wanted to include it as the school did a great job. Trinity did a great job really going into detail about why SAR is now STARS. So I thought I'd share that with you. All right. Another thing, and I'm going to do a little more in depth on this than I originally was going to go. If you're familiar at all with Texas, you know that they have an application platform called Apply Texas. And this is a central online platform that allows students to apply to multiple colleges and universities in Texas through one single application, designed to streamline the admission process, And this applies not only to Texas residents, but to out-of-state applicants as well. So just like the Common App is an app system, the UC app is an app system, Universal app, the Coalition for College, we've had interviews on that before. Linda did a great interview, with Derek on that. There's another app system. And then you have other app systems like QuestBridge has its own app and Posse has its own app. And there's even something called the Black Common App, which is popular in predominantly Black schools in particular. You'll see a lot of people use the Black Common App. About 40 schools take that. So there's a lot of these application systems out there. And Texas has one called Apply Texas. Now, it's pretty simple. You just go to applytexas.org, you set up your account, and then there's a few preliminary questions you have to answer, and then about your goals and that kind of thing. And then you complete some core questions, and then you select the schools that you're interested. And they do have some school-specific requirements that some schools have, similar to how the Common App has. And then you go ahead and you submit your applications. Okay. What I learned on this trip is people hate this thing. They hate it. And when I say people, I'm talking about the colleges that receive it. Not a single one that I talked to likes Apply Texas. Now, this first really hit home to me when I was at Baylor. and they made an announcement at the end of the information session that says, as of the class of 26, we will no longer be accepting Applied Texas anymore. So my curiosity was stimulated by this, right? What's going on? So I went and spent some time with the admission officer who was leading the information session, to find out why is it they're getting rid of it. Because if you listen to the buzz about Applied Texas, they talk about the fact that you got the single application, you got the core questions, the school-specific ones, there's a scholarship application component that's built into Applied Texas. And it's accepted by all public universities and many community colleges and many private schools. So everything sounds great. But what are the complaints? When I heard at Baylor, I heard everywhere else I went. The single biggest complaint I heard was they hated the user interface. They felt that it was basically a poor experience for both the college and for the student. So a lot of complaints about the interface, the user experience, especially compared to Coalition or Common App. It's less modern. It's not user-friendly. It's clunky. The layout is clunky. People mention how it wasn't intuitive, making it harder for students to find what they need and for colleges. Other people talked about the fact that it didn't have good integration. There was no centralized document upload. There are limited counselor tools. Some people felt that the way the writing is explained is confusing. The prompts aren't clear, leading to confusion. Even lack of guidance on the character count. So it allows for really long entries and little guidance on length. And then just duplicate entry fields and just a lot of technical glitches. I heard about that. And other things as well. Now, they've done an overhaul of this thing to supposedly fix a lot of these things in 2024, but people are not having it. Now, I actually shared with one of the schools I visited who was complaining about Applied Texas that, Baylor's dropping it. They said, oh, my goodness. They were so happy Baylor was dropping it because they're hoping that will catch on and it will, in effect, fade away. But one school administrator said to me, we would love to do that, but we can't afford to lose. That's probably 12 to 15% of our applicants are using it, and we can't afford to lose that. Everybody's preference was the Common App because a lot of schools have Applied Texas, Common App, and Coalition, or Applied Texas, Common App, and their own app, or some even had all of them, Applied Texas, Common App, Coalition, and their own app. So people have some different combination. But just for you out there, if you're in Texas or if you're out of Texas and you're applying to a Texas school, sometimes people think that if you do the application that feels a little more personal to that somehow that's showing more interest than just adding them to the Common App. Trust me, I talked to multiple administrators because I got really curious about this. I mean, Baylor was my third school on the trip. So once I heard that, I started bringing it up in my meetings, and it was just consistent. Everybody had the same complaints. Nobody liked it. But if you're getting a big chunk of your applications from it, it just is risky. If a student is using Applied Texas for all their apps and you pull off of that platform, you risk losing applications. So I thought that might be of interest to you. All right, I'm going to share something else that it's just an observation that I had on the trip. So when I was in admissions, I liked class rank. It kind of gave me a shorthand way of not getting seduced and tricked by grade inflation. So I liked it. It was another tool in the toolkit when I was on the admissions side. But for 25 years, I have felt that if I was a principal and I had jurisdiction to make a decision, I would oppose ranking. I felt that for 25 years. But my feelings on that became even more passionate and intense after this trip. It was really driven home. Because one of the things that's really interesting in Texas is that 80% of high schools rank. And I asked a VP of enrollment what percentage of applications come in with ranking, and he told me about 80%. And that's mostly because of the Texas system, right? Like, so many people are trying to get into UT, and you got to be in the top 5% of your class to get auto admitted into UT. And then the other public schools have admission for top 10%. So whether it's A&M, UT Dallas, a lot of them have just adopted that 10% auto admit for Texas public schools. So that means as a school, I mean, kind of forces your hand to put that, to put ranking on there. And then when I would travel around, remember I did 4 events. Well, I really did 3 events because one was just like a small gathering of college counselors in San Antonio. But Belton and Dallas and Austin were like events where listeners came out and asked questions. So this topic of ranking was coming up way more than I ever get when I travel and speak at other places. And I mentioned like 80% of high schools in Texas rank. Well, the most recent numbers that I could get, they're a little dated now, 2019. This is a NACAC report, said that 38% of high schools have a reported class rank. That's according to a 2019 NACAC report. Now, the trend has been decreased use of ranking. I wouldn't be surprised if it's under 33%. In fact, based on the transcripts I see from the students I work with, it feels to me it's less than 1 in 3. And I remember a few years ago now, and this is around 2019, it was a while ago, but I remember Tufts reported that only 26% of applicants had a rank on their transcripts, and they were talking about how this is drastically reduced over years. This is why you have to be careful sometimes about statistics and how you interpret them. So if you go into to look at the NACAC study that they do every year about the admission study on how colleges make decisions, you'll see class ranked really, really low. But that's mostly because not that many people are getting them as far as a determinant in how decisions are made. So why is it that I'm against class rank? And why was that magnified even more on this trip? Well, there's a lot of reasons. So class rank almost forces you to see your classmates as competitors who you want to beat versus fellow students who you want to collaborate with. It has a very negative impact on collaboration. And I have a story to tell on this. This is not something that happened in Texas. It did happen to me maybe 3 months ago or so in the counseling room. I was meeting with one of my students, and she seemed a little sad. And I said, what's going on? Well, she was ranked 4th in the class, and she was talking about how a good friend of her is taking these extra classes over the summer, and it's going to push her to number 5. And what stood out to me was she said, I hate her. And I'm thinking, okay, this is your good friend. And I realize that you probably used hate not in the literal sense. But immediately I thought, look at how it pits one student against another. And instead of you like wanting to cheer your good friend on, no, your good friend is bumping your ranking down. So that's one reason I don't like it. Another reason I don't like it is it adds a level of stress that is unhealthy. I don't think it's good for mental health. Now, a lot of times on this podcast, I have shared with you, the students I work with are all over the country. In fact, I never know in any given year, what state is going to be the place I work with the most students. Most recently, it's California by quite a bit, but I went 5 straight years where it was a different state, 5 years in a row. Like once it was New Jersey, once it was Pennsylvania, once it was California, once it was Georgia. So I never know. So I'm kind of working with students all over. A lot of people that do what I do, like they mostly work with like in a geographic area. It's different for me. And not just me, but anyone that works with School Match for You. It's like our students come from all over. And so I have mentioned before that I find certain areas to be really intense. Boston for sure is one. North Jersey, Princeton all the way up is one. Westchester County and kind of that Scarsdale, that whole area in New York, definitely. Bethesda to Northern Virginia, definitely. North Shore of Chicago. Pockets of Orange County and kind of Menlo Park, Palo Alto. Those are some that come to mind. But Texas was every bit at that level in suburban public schools, and it's because of the ranking, because the culture there is not quite the same, but the ranking just produced levels of stress that are just very, very, very unhealthy. So that's another reason why I don't like it. But there's other reasons. I find that with ranking, it diminishes learning for the sake of learning. Like some people argue grades does that as well, right? That's why places like Reed don't have grades. And even when Jim Bach was on from Swarthmore, he talked about they don't, you come in right away as part of your orientation. MIT does this as well. Some of the real intense schools do that to kind of take some of the edge off, and they don't do grades right away just to help people sort of get adjusted to the school and the level of learning. So people argue that about grades, but I really feel like ranking does that, right? Like you're doing what you're doing for your rank, not for the love of learning. So that's another thing I don't like. And another reason, friends, why I don't like rank is because it punishes the student that is at a very good school. Maybe you're at a private school that's already selective to begin with, or you're at a really competitive suburban school with a lot of high achievers, and you could be an outstanding applicant, but if your rank isn't that great, there's going to be a lot of schools that are going to pass on you just because some of the more selective schools in the country, they do like the majority of their students to be top 10% or even top 5% of the class. So I had a story this year about that. I was working with this student, and he had a rank on his transcript, and it was 27th. And this student had sky-high grades. He had sky-high testing. He had mostly 5s on his APs. So when he met with me, he's looking at himself as the student with super high test scores, AP and SAT, and really high grades. So he thought that he was going to be competitive at the most competitive schools in the country. And I had to let him know, like, from my research, I haven't seen students with your rank get in those schools. And it was a really tough conversation. He appreciated it later because, he didn't get in those schools, and it prepared him for that. But rank really tends to hurt students that are coming from a pool of applicants where most of the kids are really, really strong, because you're just not going to have that higher rank, and you're looking at schools a lot of times where it's just not the norm for them to take very many kids outside of the top 10% unless you're coming in with a real hook, a real institutional priority that they find difficult to attract. And at least it intensifies grade obsession. Another thing is it can lead to course selection manipulation. And then you guys have heard me say this if you're regular listeners, as far as our listening family. Numbers do voodoo on the brain. I talk about it all the time. I usually talk about it in the context of why I don't like test scores. I feel like they overpower very important personal qualities and cause them to be diminished in the role that they play in the evaluation of an applicant. And I feel like these personal qualities, they're so powerful to improve the campus quality, and they're highly correlated with life success. Sometime I'll do a whole episode about all of these personal qualities that I'm talking about. I refer to a few here, a few there, but I'll do a whole deep dive on all of them at some point. So the same's true of ranking, though. They absolutely do, because they cement a number in your mind and you think, number 4 is better than 24. But 24 might be clearly the person that could come onto your campus and be the difference maker. Number 74 might be better than number 4. But it's really hard to kind of get there mentally. And so there's a fraction of a point can separate students by rank and leading to distinctions that really aren't meaningful. So for all of those reasons, I just really have renewed passion that it's not healthy having a system of ranking. And, one of the families I worked with this year is from Wisconsin, and they're very, very, very active in school board and things like that. And some of you may know this, some of you may not know this, but UW-Madison went to a 5% plan this last year, patterned after Texas. And I understand why schools do it. South Carolina's gone to a 10% plan. Tennessee's gone to a 10% plan. We did an episode on how these plans are popular in New York, because on the positive side, they can keep some of your talent in state because, you remove a big barrier for people applying if they can have confidence they're getting in. And they can become very effective at you targeting underrepresented demographics, like some urban environments, some rural environments that don't have college-going cultures. Well, if you can remove the barrier of, you're going to get in, you have an increased chance of yielding that student. And some of them have really resulted in that. I shared on this podcast how pleased the VP of enrollment at South Carolina was, and surprised, quite honestly, that when they went to their 10% plan, coupled with the scholarship they threw in there, how effective it was at generating more applications and more matriculants. So I get the appeal on that side, but I'm looking at it from a standpoint of like healthy school culture and what's good or not good for the student. And I came away from the Texas trip with even more fervor in my belief that it's just not a good thing to do. And my client in Wisconsin, many a time she would send me all this stuff. It was really fascinating to me, but she was in there fighting. But they made the decision. They weren't going to change. But she saw this happening and coming, and she was trying to stop it from impacting Wisconsin. Well, friends, hopefully you enjoyed those recaps from my Texas trip. If I think of anything else that I think would be of interest to you, I'll include it, but I'm not going to do a whole kind of episode on it anymore. I may throw something in as an aside in addition. I've got a lot of other content I want to cover with you guys over the next month or two. But it's time for John Pollard, Dr. John Pollard, breaking down his panoramic overview, honors colleges in the United States.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, this is a one-part segment as John Pollard, Dr. John Pollard, gives an overview of various honors colleges in the United States. John starts out by just letting us know the national landscape when it comes to honors colleges. Then John explains some outstanding strengths that almost all honors colleges have in common. John gives us the history of honors colleges, and he shares how they've evolved in the last 30 to 40 years. John shares what questions students and parents need to ask to differentiate between one honors college and another one. And he gives us 9 questions students and parents need to ask when comparing these honors colleges to each other. John lets us know the difference between an honors college and an honors program. John talks about the caliber of the faculty at the honors college that they attract. And John shares 3 ways in which students have an honors college experience academically and how they vary from one honors college to another. Listen and enjoy. All right, well, let's talk about honors colleges in general. I had a really great pre-meeting with John. I left very excited. I'm not surprised you're a podcaster because I told several people, you're a great communicator. Can't wait to have you on. But because I knew you were a professor and chemistry and biochem, and I was like, I hope he's not going to be boring.
That could have been. That's not unheard of.
But one of the things you said in our meeting, which I really liked, was we just discussed the whole kind of national picture and how there's so many different types of honors colleges. You can't just hear honors college and think they're all the same. So you just sort of take some time to unpack that for our listeners, like the different, focuses and sizes and emphasis and all of that. So I think that's a great place for us to start.
Yeah, great question. I'm a big fan of honors education, and honors education is uniquely American, by the way. You go to other countries and you won't find honors colleges like you do here. And what I really like about honors colleges is, like you said, is there's a huge distribution of the sizes of them, of the emphasis that they have for their student experience. A lot of times there's shared things that honors colleges do, but honors colleges in general are also represent sort of the sources of innovation at the university often. I know it's like here at Franke, where where new pedagogy, new programs, new ways of engaging students in experiential learning is often done at the Honors College. And honors colleges, a couple of things that all honors colleges have in common typically is that students are really encouraged and sort of required to complete the honors experience to get involved in research or creative inquiry right away. And we know that experiential learning is one of the best practices in higher ed, is to get students involved in undergraduate research and creative inquiry and scholarship, regardless of the discipline, from fine arts to physics and everything in between. And honors colleges are really committed to that. They're also, in general, committed to smaller class experiences for our students. They're committed to global experiences, study abroad. I mean, I think if you go to any institution, I know this is true at the University of Arizona, if you take the percentage of students in the honors college and then the percentage of students at the institution that study abroad, those don't match. In other words, more of the students who study abroad are from the honors program or college. And the honors colleges also provides a cohorting experience. And often, like we have here and other honors colleges have, they have their own first and second year living learning communities where students come in, and they're unique because you have all these sort of not just high achieving, it's not just because they're the smarter students, but they're rather students who want to get more out of the university experience. They want to engage more. And so they have a more of a curiosity often and naturally. And so to cohort them together is really fantastic. I was up speaking at an event up in Scottsdale earlier this week for a scholarship called the Flynn Scholarship, which is for the state of Arizona, for Flynn finalists. And speaking to them about the fact that a lot of these students who come to honors colleges are the top students at their high school, and they kind of separate themselves, but now when they come to an honors college, wherever they go, they get to be amongst all those kinds of students. And there's something valuable about leveling up like that, to be around other really engaged students, future leaders, future change makers. And honors colleges are incubators for those types of students. Honors used to be, if you went back 30, 40 years, the honors experience was very much, all these honors colleges were very small. It's very boutique-y, custom, maybe extra reading book club or something with professors, very much set after the Oxford model in a way. But what they ended up evolving into, and in particular at places like University of Arizona, University of Alabama, Arizona State University, I can go across the list, University of Oklahoma, et cetera, is they turned into these places that grew, and they had to build programs around them. And they became an attractor for that institution to draw these high achieving students that could go to MIT, Harvard, Stanford, but decide to go to these places. And that's now the role that the honors colleges often play at these larger institutions.
Yeah, and at a fraction of the cost of a Stanford or an MIT
You're
as well.
right. So you can get that liberal. So, that St. John's University I went to is actually a little bit smaller than a Franke Honors College, ironically. And I had that small liberal arts kind of, it was an honors college experience. So can you take that and then have that experience within the larger setting of a Research One institution, which has a lot of benefits to it, that also has the collegiate environment that you're not going to get at those smaller schools. And I think that's what honors colleges sort of achieve at many of the institutions across the country. And now they range in size. There's, oftentimes honors colleges will be, 800, 900 students, 1,200 students, and then they get bigger. You go to like NAU, which has got a little bit south of 2,000 students. Franke's got 4,000. ASU's Honors College Barrett has got upwards almost 8,000, I think. And then University of Alabama, I think, got even more. And you're starting to see these honors colleges grow in size because the institution, I think, is wanting to attract more of these students. But that presents its own challenges as well in terms of the experience. So,
what would you say a parent and a student that say, you know what, I want honors college. I want it. I like the best of big and small. You're nestled in the R1. They get all the fraternities and the sports and the resources and facilities and all. It comes with that big time programming, but I also get the intimate experience at a price point I like. But we know they're not all the same.
Yeah.
So, what are the things that a student and a parent should look for, in your opinion, when they're looking at an honors college and they're trying to compare different ones? What are the important things that you think they need to be aware of?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's important to consider what the institution is that the honors college is at. Now, some honors colleges have taken the strategy of trying to separate themselves from the institution that they're at. And there might be reasons they do that to try to kind of silo themselves. And I'm not being critical of that. I think that's a strategy that some have used effectively and built, robust programs. Some are more like woven into the institution, or both have their own identity, but woven in. I think here's a couple questions I would definitely check out if I was checking out honors colleges. What is the first year experience like for them? In other words, do they have a living learning community? Do they have a place where all the honors colleges, all the students live? More often than not, honors colleges now have their own dormitory kind of living experience. What is that experience like? What's the quality of that facility and everything like that? Does the honors college have its own embedded faculty? In other words, as the honors college, as a student enters honors, there's going to be a requirement typically for them to complete certain numbers of honors credits or honors units. How do they achieve that? How do they take courses to graduate with honors? What is that experience like for students, right? Do they have in-house faculty? Do they have classrooms that are in their their living learning community, for example? What other opportunities or what other benefits are there from being in the honors college? I think that's the first question I would ask as a parent. It's like, what is the benefits for my kid for being in the honors college? And, those benefits can be additional scholarship money. Always look into that. Two can be, smaller classes. Ask about that. Undergraduate research opportunities. That's a big one. Ask, do students get involved in undergraduate research right away? Are there mechanisms for them to get involved in that? And then look for something of what's innovative about the program. Is there something unique and innovative about it that might be appealing to the student? Is the honors college innovating at the institution? I think that's a question I would ask as well. And of course, the size of the honors college. Some people might some parents and students might think, oh, I want to go to a small one because I'm going to have this really custom boutique experience through. But there are also benefits to the larger honors college as well. They have the ability to do things that the smaller ones don't necessarily do. And then, of course, most honors colleges are committed to study abroad experiences to some capacity, but scholarship money for study abroad experiences is something you should ask about, because study abroad is not cheap anymore. The pandemic ruined the prices of study abroad, I'll tell you that. And, and then I think the final thing is talking to the students in the college. Does your kid, when you got to visit these places if you can, does your kid engage with those students, and is there a connection there? Do they see other scholars that are like-minded like them? I think that's an important thing that you got to kind of go and see. Does it feel like a fit? I think if you just consider all those things, that's what I would probably look at when I'm looking at honors colleges.
Sometimes you'll see the term honors program.
Yeah.
What's the difference between an honors program versus an honors college?
Yeah, an honors program tends to be, not always, but most of the time tends to be a little bit smaller, and it's more of a distributive model. In other words, the honors program probably has very low staff involved with it, maybe a director, and really what it is about trying to provide sort of an honors pathway for students across the campus, but it's not a college because it doesn't have maybe a dean. It doesn't have any academic programs formally. It hasn't been given an endowed name. So sometimes an honors program will become a college because someone comes in and names it. And it's typically they're less structured than the honors colleges are. The honors colleges tend to be more mature in the honors education space. Now, I will say this, though. There are some fantastic honors programs across the country. So I am not, by no means am I saying anything against honors programs. In fact, there are some particular in California, that I'm aware of, that just they do great work, and they tend to be smaller, more traditional honors experiences for students, and they provide it kind of analogous to, what they're analogous to is when you see honors programs in high schools. They're kind of like that, but at the collegiate level. Whereas the honors college will have dean level representation, will be organized more with more staff, maybe have its own advising team, its own faculty. And in some cases, like in Franke, this is rare, our own degree pathways, etc. So it's just kind of a more formalized version when it goes to a college.
From your experience, do the top professors want to teach in honors colleges?
Oh my God, yes. And I have had professors across campus tell me that engaging with honors students is one of the reasons that they love teaching, And we also all often hear when our honors students, our Franke honors students, get into labs or undergraduate research experience, that all faculty come to me and say, they're better than my graduate students. Oh yeah, I mean, they're a big commodity on campus, and in fact, one thing I'll say about honors colleges and honors programs as well, they are retention and graduation engines for institutions. I know at the University of Arizona, if a student enters the Franke Honors College or even has a touch point with the Franke Honors College, even if they don't finish the honors requirements and graduate with honors, their graduation rate is over 20% points higher on average 4-year graduation rate. So, and I know that that's true for my other colleagues at other honors colleges. These are important entities within these institutions that really drive up and help support higher graduation and retention rates.
John, do you think one of the questions that students and parents should look into is how often am I in a smaller teaching setting with just honors students? Because I know some of them, and you see this more with honors programs, but they'll give like an extra assignment and slap the word honors on it. But that's a very different experience than being with these high achieving students who you live with in a smaller class setting. And there's a big variation from one to the next in terms of, is that something that happens 5% of the time, 30% of the time? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, this is definitely a question, and I'm glad you brought this up, Mark. This is definitely a question that a parent should ask. Now, in general, at honors colleges, there are typically 3 ways that honors students have honors experience in courses, okay? One, at larger honors colleges, they'll have a system called like an honors contracting. And what that contracting is that it's kind of like you said, but really, we've really fought against it just being this extra assignment, because I'm like, oh, come on, that's just ridiculous. Let's make it more meaningful. So we've really worked to structure when we contract with faculty to make meaning of that extra assignment. The second way is that you'll find honors sections of courses that are not taught by the honors college. For example, in my home department of chemistry, I taught an honors section of chemistry, which is all honors students. Now, it's not a small class though, but it's a great class. You can have a really amazing learning experience if you have evidence-based instruction, active learning in a kind of classroom with 100 students. I've taught like that for much of my career. And so sometimes the size of the class doesn't always mean that it's a good class. You can have a bad small class, right? But do they have honors sections of courses? And in particular, honors sections within their major, I think is important. Then the third is, do they have honors classes exclusive, which are maybe stood up by the honors college? And almost all honors colleges will have at least a seminar course, a required first-year course, or other courses that are like that. At Franke, we're a little unique that we have more than that, because we have 2 minors, a dual degree program, and a leadership certificate. So we teach a lot more out of the honors college than typical honors colleges do. But yeah, those are definitely things to ask as parents. Like, I think the thing to ask is, how does the student graduate with honors? It's usually a GPA requirement. They have to complete a thesis. Okay, so GPA, that's pretty clear cut. They have to complete a thesis. So how much support does the college or program give to do that? And 3 is the honors units. And those are those different pathways that students will get the honors units. What is the support for all of those things?
Great. Well, any final comments at all on honors colleges in general?
Honors education, I think, is the vanguard of innovation in higher ed across the country. I am proud to be a member of the honors community across the country. And I'll say the state of Arizona has 3 fantastic honors colleges, Franke here at U of A, Barrett at ASU, and the honors college at NAU. We have over 13,000 students in engaged in honors education here at the university or in the state of Arizona. And I think it's one of the strengths by far of our 3 institutions in terms of undergraduate learning.
On Monday's episode, a first ever on Your College Bound Kid, we're going to take 3 questions from listeners from 3 different co-hosts. That's right, Julia will join me to answer a question from a dad in North Carolina who wants to know, is there any way to approximate class rank when it isn't listed? And we had 2 different questions, very similar but a little different, about medical school admissions, one from an anonymous listener and one from a student in Virginia named Carter. And the questions were similar enough that we combined them and just talked about both of them together, we being Susan and I. It's a lengthy discussion, so you'll hear our answer to those 2 questions over the next 2 weeks. And then Hillary joins me to answer a question from an anonymous mom who wants to know if what she is reading on the internet is correct, that students should not mention race in their personal statement. So Hillary has some very strong opinions on this, and you're going to want to tune in to hear what she has to say. And friends, you'll hear the final part of my interview with Nate Haveman, the VP of Enrollment at Hope College, and we're talking about Hope College. I close out with words of wisdom today from Warren Buffett, who is stepping down at the age of 94 after 60 years at Berkshire Hathaway, famed investor, one of the wealthiest men in the world, and just a good, kind soul. And Buffett has a lot of aphorisms that I could share and leave you with, but I want to share this one with you. Warren Buffett, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you will do things differently. Did you catch that? It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about Your College Bound Kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.